Hi, and welcome to our first podcast. This is podcast 001. I'm sitting here in our new studio with our new equipment. Our wonderful producer, Javaska Thomas.
Thank you.
And and we're going to discuss life, different aspects of life. So, Javaska, you have some questions for me. I know that.
Yes. So my first question to you is, what led up to now? What led up to this, your life, this podcast, just everything? Like, what's happening right now?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because for all of us, you watching and so forth, everything that you're doing led up to this particular moment. For me, what led up to now was meeting you, us discussing doing podcasts, us discussing social media. And how I met you is that you were my student at Penn State. And it's also interesting because I just got a new computer that was built by another student. And that to me is very interesting. And if you look at the protection of the evil eye, that was a gift from another former student. So I love being a college professor. I really do enjoy meeting students and so forth, and working with my colleagues. My colleagues are great. I, get along with all of them, and it's fun. But that's sort of what led up to now. Now, what led up to that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, me personally, like going to Penn State and stuff like that. I had a friend. His name is Eric, and he took your classes before. And I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and ownership and business and yada, yada, yada. That's what I'm studying right now. But he told me about your classes. He was like, this guy, he's it. He's the guy.
That's pretty cool.
Like,
cool.
He's the one and only reason why I even knew about you and why I took your classes.
That's cool. I never knew that.
Yeah. So that's why, like, when I first got into, what was it? 425 with like the group classes. That's the reason why I started at the top, because I wanted to be in a class with him. That was my bug.
Get it now. I get it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And we always came to class together and
I
stuff
get
like
it
that.
now. That's cool.
So he was the one who introduced me to the idea of like, yeah, we have an entrepreneurship minor and stuff like that. And I was like, this is cool. And then I got to the class, and then I don't know, it's just history from there.
It's
great.
Very cool.
And then I think what really put the nail in was one day I came to class with a baseball cap, and it was actually my pep band cap from Central High School. And you were like, "Would you go to Central?" And you were, I think it was that at that moment I was like, "This world is ridiculously small."
It is, and it's interesting for those of you. Did I almost say use of those? But
hey.
for those of you who don't know, Central High School is the oldest continuous public high school, second oldest in the United States. And when I graduated, it was the #1 academic high school in the country. And it was just named the most diverse high school in the country as well.
It is.
So it's a great school, and I wear this little bracelet right here that says Central 224. That's my high school class number, and that's what we do. We don't say, well, I graduated in this year or that year. We may say it, but when someone from Central sees another person from Central, they say, what class are you from? And they say 274, 253, 224, 216, whatever it is.
Yeah, and the cool part is you're 224 and I'm 274, so we're literally like 50 years apart.
That's
and
true.
Somehow our paths crossed into today, and it's wild.
It's a trip. It is. And how I got to that place, that circuitous route to becoming a college professor. And a lot of people ask me how I became a college professor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not your typical. It's not your typical. There you go. I got to move this closer. We're trying out all the new equipment. This is all brand new, just set up today. The mixing board, all the microphones, the stands, the whole 9 yards. So most people, they go to school, they get their master's degree, they go on, maybe they get a doctorate, and they apply. They do their research, and they get a position as a college professor. With me, it was quite different because, as many of you know, and our listeners and viewers may know, I started a company called Four Eyes Optical back in the 1840s.
And not to interrupt you, when I found that out in class, it was crazy to me because that is where I got my prescription from. And
cool.
then I found out, I was like, four eyes, and he's like, yes, 4 eyes.
Cool.
I'm like, what?
That's pretty cool.
I was like, what? That's where I got my glasses from. So
that's neat.
It's obviously been disassociated from its roots since I got it, but still, like that's
I mean,
amazing.
I started it back in the 70s.
Yeah,
it's been sold a few times. I mean, I sold, and then it was just sold to a Dutch company. But just about a year and a half ago, something like that. But what happened was that I actually was on a number of boards, chaired boards, did a lot of pro bono, free work. Pardon me. And a lot of that was for civic organizations and universities. So I was asked. Well, I chaired the board at the Drexel School of Public Health. I actually formed the board and chaired the board at the Drexel School of Public Health, which is, there's an interesting background how I got to that point. I was on the executive board of the International Visitors Council, which is now has a different name. It's Diplomacy International or something along those lines, and it's under the State Department. And there I met the dean at Drexel at the School of Public Health, and he said, well, you know all these people, can you form a board? I formed that board. And then I did some work for Kutztown University, which is up in Kutztown, PA. It's a state-owned school in Pennsylvania.
Is that position at Kutztown related to the board positions that you had previously at Drexel and everywhere else?
It sort of folded in somehow. I was working, doing pro bono work for their Small Business Development Center.
Nice.
Okay. With my friend Don Martin and Bud Batzer,
who co-wrote your book.
Right. Don Martin co-wrote
Get the
book,
plug in.
The Entrepreneur's Guide to Successful Leadership,
which I bought on the second day of class.
It's a pretty cool book.
Still haven't finished. Sorry.
It's a good book. The first book I wrote was Lighten Up and Lead, and the last book I wrote was Soaring to Enlightenment: The Secret to Living a Contented Life. So I was working with Don Martin and Bud Batzer with the SBDC and Small Business Development Center. And the acting dean at the time said to me, we know that you've worked with Drexel and formed the board. Can you help us form a board here at our College of Business at Kutztown? Which I did. I worked with them and Eileen Hogan, and we formed the board, and then she left, and we had another acting dean, and then I was on the search committee for that dean. This is a long story.
Got you.
I chaired that, and I did a lot of pro bono work for Kutztown, and in a lot of different ways. And one day I was asked, you've done so much for us. What can we do for you?
Ooh.
And I always tell people when I got off the floor, because everyone's a taker. Most people are takers and very few people are givers.
I agree.
So I was so taken aback and so honored that I said, I always wanted an MBA. I always wanted a master's. And she said, okay, we can, I think we can make that happen.
Do something for you.
And what they did was they just ferreted me through the system. I still had to pay. I still had to take all the courses.
Definitely.
I still had to pass the courses. But they just made it easier for me to apply and get accepted and so forth. And once I graduated, they said, basically, well, you have a master's. Why don't you teach for us?
Hey. And this is Kutztown still.
Kutztown. And then my good friend, Bob Giacalone, I was talking to him, and he was a professor at Temple at the time, and he said, hey, you have a master's? You got to talk to my friend Gary. And I spoke to Gary, and Gary.
Gary Color.
Gary Kalor's at Penn State. Gary Blau.
Okay, understood.
Is Temple. And he interviewed me, and I started teaching at Temple. And then I had done some pro bono work for Penn State's continuing education. I did a lot of pro bono stuff, a lot of free stuff.
I think that's the continuing sort of theme. You gotta put in the work before you sort of reap it in. You don't be afraid to do things pro bono.
Correct. It's so I was speaking with them, and they were in what is now called Brandywine.
Okay.
It had another name before, but it's in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And I said, yeah, I'm just, I was talking to them. And they said, oh, you have a master's degree? Oh, they need somebody over at Abington. And then she called Gary Kalor, and Gary said, when can you come over? And I came right over. And then within, 2 weeks, I was teaching at 3 schools. I had positions at 3 schools. And then a position came up, and after about 7 years of me being an adjunct at 3 schools and doing my other stuff, because I have a consulting firm as well, or had it. I still do a little bit of consulting, but not much. They offered me a full-time position, or they opened one up, and I got a full-time position to head up the entrepreneurship and innovation inter-college minor at Abington, Penn State Abington. And now I do all the core courses there. I supervise the interns, accounting and business. I do a course for University Park across the system. It's that engineering 310, which is also management 397.
The group stuff. That was a fun class.
Yeah,
actually, I enjoyed that class.
And so I really love my students. I feel like they're my children. I want them to all succeed and be happy and do well. I do.
The eye contact with the children. Okay.
It's like I know this is weird when I tell this to my colleagues. Some of them get it. I said all my students have my cell phone number.
That is true,
because it's right there on the syllabus. Just call me if you need me. Just realize I have a life. Don't call me late at night and stuff like that, or text me and tell me if you're going to be late, or tell me if I can help you, or whatever. So I stay in touch with them, and many of them are Facebook friends and Facebook followers on my Dan Goldberg FB page, which has a lot of followers, and Instagram and so forth, and Twitter. So while doing all that, I speak with students who have certain aspects of their education that are growing, and they want more knowledge, and they have certain expertise. I mean, any professor who thinks they know everything is out of battery.
One moment. I don't think so.
Well, let's check it out.
I think it just cuts off the audio at a certain point.
Okay, so we're good with that. Okay, so we're back.
Audio sync.
Audio sync.
Audio sync.
So
this is new.
As opposed to audio going down the sink,
yes,
the drain. So any professor who thinks they know everything and can't learn from their students is fooling themselves. So I always try to learn as much from my students as they learn from me. And that's how I learned about the social media aspect of business from you. Or I knew about social media, that.
Yeah.
But enhancing it and building it. And I did do podcasts, but it was different back then. Mm-hmm. So it's your expertise that and your suggestion of why don't you do this and why don't you do that I said to you, well, why don't you help me do this and that? Okay, why don't we do this together? Just like with Robert, who said, oh, I build computers. I said, well, build me a computer.
Yeah,
and he built me this amazing computer with 4 hard drives and lightning speed. Yeah. So it's like, and I stay in touch with them, all my students, as I said before. And I think it's important. I really do, because if I'm teaching entrepreneurship and I'm basically, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, while I'm still a professor, but to me, it's like, okay, if I'm going to teach this stuff, I'm not teaching from theory.
Yes,
You know,
and that's a big thing. That's a big thing that sort of attracted me to the courses, was the fact that there's a big difference between theory and actually doing it.
Practice,
and when you have your anecdotes and when you have actual real world examples, that really impacts me as a person, and I'm sure a lot of my peers as students, way more than reading through a textbook or sort of doing any sort of case study. When I know that this person in front of me actually did this and has XYZ to say about it, that's really where, it sticks for kids.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have friends that have written textbooks that have never done what they're writing the textbook about.
How do you do that?
Well, you do research. That's what you do. You do research.
Oh,
so,
God.
That's when I also decided that it would be important to have a board for entrepreneurship and innovation in the minor, and we bring those board members in to speak to the classes, so they give their perspective. I mean, they have a different perspective than I do, and some of them took their family's business, which was small, and built it into huge businesses. And other ones started with nothing and built businesses. And some of them just left other companies because they didn't like the way that they were working. And I find that to be invigorating. Whether in teaching entrepreneurship and teaching ethics. I taught ethics for many, many years. I taught all forms of entrepreneurship at Kutztown as well, and Temple, and ethics and capstone courses and so forth. So for me, it led up to this. This is what led to this moment. And if I had to give people advice, and you just gave it, I mean, you got to put in your dues. You got to.
Exactly.
It's because I had this company that was very successful and literally changed the way all professionals market in the United States.
Tell them.
The Senate Select Committee on Small Business and the Federal Trade Commission actually cited me and the company as the reasons to change regulations and allow doctors, hospitals, lawyers, and so forth to advertise.
Wow.
I have that article from the Washington Post upstairs. It's like I didn't expect to become a college professor and like have tenure and be a full professor. Or I didn't expect to come in at the top. No,
What's
came
tenure?
in.
What is that even?
Tenure.
I hear it all the time.
Tenure is that basically you've met all the criteria, you've done the research, you have a terminal degree. Usually, sometimes a professor, and that's a terrible word, a terminal degree.
I was just thinking that.
It means the last degree, the end of degrees. So that's a doctorate.
You're a master. You don't need to learn anything else ever again.
Right. So what it is, but you have to still publish. You have to do all these other things.
I see.
And then you start off as an assistant professor. I think then you become an associate professor. Then you can become a full professor.
Oh.
But you can be tenured as an assistant professor, I believe. In some schools, you could be tenured as a master's degree because that may be the terminal degree. There is no higher degree in that field. But the fact is that once you become tenured, it's like almost like a civil service job. Unless you do something totally egregious, you can't be fired.
And that's where I sort of heard the word from, because like yada 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 drama would happen in a school or something, and they would say the professor is tenured, and it would be really hard for that professor to lose its position. So I always heard it through context, but I never really understood
that. That's what it
is.
Thing. And you have to apply for it, and there's all kinds of criteria.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Judged by your peers and all
Job
this other
security times a million.
Yeah, it's job security times a million. That's what it is. However, I knew that no matter how big my company was and how I built it, whatever, I'm starting at the bottom.
Yeah.
I started at the bottom again. Even at a place where I chaired the board, I start at the bottom as a professor. And you got to be willing to start at the bottom. No matter what, don't think you're bigger than the game. Nobody's bigger than the game. Nobody's bigger than, no player's bigger than any sport. No professor's bigger than any school. You start at the bottom. and you work your way up. And if you have that within you and the tenacity to stick with it through all the ups and downs, you could be in a position that led up to this podcast, this video. So I guess the ultimate lesson is tenacity. The ultimate lesson is think about what you want to do and be passionate enough, an overused word. It's definitely overused. But have the intestinal fortitude to put up with stuff, right? Sometimes you'll have to put up with the crap that you don't even really want to deal with, but you gotta.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to do it. So if you really want to do that, and you really want to have that position or I don't know, goal.
Yeah, anything in life, you can apply that to anything.
Yeah,
in life.
you can apply it to anything.
That job, that girl, that car, that whatever.
Exactly.
You got to just go through it.
You got to understand your priorities.
Exactly.
If your priorities are that job, well, what's it going to take to get to that place? If it's that girl, okay, or that boy, you know,
exactly,
or that house,
that dog,
that
real cute dog you saw,
right?
It can be yours.
It can be yours. Not that particular dog.
That is someone else's dog.
That would be criminal. But yeah, and does it always work out? No, it doesn't always work out. But if it doesn't always work out, there's option B. So always have an option B. What if that doesn't happen? Okay. What if she decides she doesn't like me?
That's okay.
That's okay. There's another one out there.
So many.
Right. So many millions. I'll never forget this.
It's ridiculous. There's too many.
I'm just putting my mustache in its proper place.
Oh.
Yes. Like never think, oh, I lost. No, you didn't lose. You learned a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, the next time around, it'll be a little different. So I guess all this stuff led me to sitting here with you, doing our first podcast.
Wow.
Giving my story, which hope
sort of
my story.
I know there's like way
the story
more.
Is very, very textured, and I didn't even get into my stand-up comedy or my comedy writing and who I worked with.
He had an oil company.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
And being the chairman of an oil company and oil and gas exploration and production, having a management, marketing, advertising, public relations firm for many years with some really huge clients, which circuitously, use that term again, led to the oil and gas
crisis
company. No, the company. and that was as a joint venture with the government. It's very interesting, and all the places I've lived, and in Philadelphia, I've always lived in Philly, and except for a short stint in L.A. By the way, if you're watching this from any other place but Philadelphia, which I'm sure many of you will
please let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Dan G 4, the letter 4. I'm the number 4, U, and the letter 2. Dan G 4 U.
We'll put it in the description below. No worries.
It's a number 4 and a number 2. Did I say letter?
You said letter.
I screwed that up. Okay, so it's Dan G 4 U 2. Like us on Facebook at Dan Goldberg FB. That's the public figure page. Like us on Twitter, which is Danny Goldberg at Danny Goldberg, and Instagram at Dan.Goldberg.
It's hard to get the aliases on all the platforms. It's
I
really
know
hard to do
but I do own all the almost all the DanGoldberg.com,
that is
.net,
true,
and everything else on the web. So and visit the website, which is DanGoldberg.com.
Boom.
Or DanGoldberg.net, which is they're both linked.
Buy a book. Merch coming soon.
Yeah, merch
all
coming
that
soon. All that, and we have that little bug in the corner of our stuff on our videos and so forth, which is pretty neat.
And if you'd like, you can follow me on Instagram at Javi, Jahvy.
Hey,
if you'd like.
Follow Javi on
Don't
Instagram.
need to.
Yes, that would be cool. Okay, because I follow Javi and all that stuff. So we're working together on this, building it up. And now we do have a YouTube episode called Ask Dan.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that usually goes on our which page is that? Is that Twitter? Or
Putting it up everywhere.
We'll have it up everywhere.
Yeah.
On Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. So you send in your questions, in your comments, and then we have a special show where I answer your questions. It can be about anything, and if I know the answers, or all the answers are from my perspective, and that's the only perspective you have, right? And sometimes I don't have the answers, so I'll tell you that. And maybe I'll suggest where to go for an answer, and maybe I won't if I don't know. So we have that, and then we have our Soaring to Success series episodes and that. So look for those, and then we have our quotes, video quotes,
daily quotes,
and daily quotes, and they're both video and sometimes they're posters as well. So we're having fun and we're building it up, and we're going to have more and more podcasts, and we'll have guests and so
speakers,
forth. Guest speakers, the whole 9 yards. Guests,
interviews.
Yep. So it's going to be fun. Follow us, and I think that's podcast episode 1. I guess we're done. Thanks. See ya. Take care.